Hey, I'm Elsa.
And I'm Baron.
And today is our 1-year anniversary of living in the Scamp trailer. We were living in a 1-bedroom apartment about 5 years ago when Baron brought up the idea to me.
The obvious thing that I had on my side was that houses are just stupid expensive. And this was a way that we could pay off a house for an amount of money that actually makes sense.
We were draining away $700 with that apartment and $900 for a house from a family friend.
And that's just rent, like utilities and everything.
And that's just Kansas City, too.
Right.
With Baron, I started doing some research on tiny houses, looking at YouTube and looking at
I would just find
forums.
the highlights and then bring Elsa all the highlights of like the cutest one, or the one that was like the most something that she would dig, and then over and over again.
They're really freaking cool. Tiny houses are sweet. Fall of 2015, we decided to take a trip to Portland. We'd been looking at some tiny house builders. We thought that we would get a tiny house built for us so that we could save time. We wouldn't have to pay rent living in a space as we were building our tiny house.
We liked the idea of a tiny house because we could build something custom, so we could get exactly what we wanted, laid out how we wanted. We could have workspace, like a nice bathroom, like all the things that we needed.
Or thought we needed.
Yeah. Ironically, we wanted a space where Elsa could set up cameras and have like a good place to do tutorials and stuff. And it's kind of hilarious because we have 3 cameras set up right now and we're doing it right here. So we toured tiny houses, and after we left Portland, we loved them. Like, we were all in, like, thought it was a great idea. And then we got home and looked into loans, like how we were going to pay for it, because they were like anywhere between 50 to 80 grand depending on how you did it, which was still a lot cheaper than any of the houses we could have bought in Kansas City. So we were still like, okay, like we can own a thing.
Then we thought about it, and like we could do so many things with $50,000 to $80,000.
That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of commitment.
We've both been self-employed for several years, so getting a loan with our variable incomes and self-employed tax returns wasn't going to be easy. It's also a matter of, is it an RV loan? Is it a house loan?
The other thing was we couldn't find anywhere to park it legally.
In Kansas City especially.
Right. There was nowhere that we could legally do it aside from maybe an RV park. But then we would be paying rent to an RV park every month and living in an RV park in our tiny house, which not super sensical. No. Tiny homes also are very heavy, so you effectively need a semi-truck to pull them around. And they're not meant to be towed all the time.
So we needed a place to park this thing and to not move it unless we had to. Mm-hmm. And then all those things combined brought us to the idea of RVs.
People mentioned it often though.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you just get an RV?
Stubbornly clung to the tiny house thing because it's cool.
RVs are generally pretty heinous looking. They look like something out of that 70s show, like intentionally.
And we just thought we needed more space too.
Yeah.
We thought that an RV wasn't going to cut it. It started making more sense that RVs are made to be traveled in. RVs are significantly cheaper.
It was easy to get a loan on them too.
Yeah, they're legal. My grandparents have been living in their RVs through the winters for I think my entire life. They're snowbirds and they would go down to Mexico. So we drove up to Iowa and went with them and toured a bunch of RVs.
We went to some RV retailers to look at used RVs, and we looked at toy haulers, for example, and like utility trailers, because
like a U-Haul, an empty U-Haul.
Because they were convertible, we could do whatever we wanted to them.
We also looked at truck bed campers with the camper in the truck bed of a truck, and we looked at some other tow-behind trailers.
We really couldn't find anything much smaller than 20 feet though.
Yeah, and we were looking for something smaller.
Primarily so that we wouldn't have to get a giant truck. Elsa's grandpa Huck insisted that we have a truck over and over again. You gotta have a damn truck. Like, he wouldn't let it go.
Well, because for most of these things you do, and we would have. So that was going to be an added expense, an expense that was probably going to cost more than the camper itself. While we were in Iowa, we were also on Craigslist trying to find some other places to look for trailers, and ended up finding a teeny tiny little fiberglass trailer in my grandma's neighborhood.
It was the first camp that we had ever seen, and we toured it, but it was really
It was small, so small. It had a bathroom, so that cut down on its whole size. I thought that it could never be something livable, but it was really cool.
It was an older guy that had it, and he said that he had traveled the West Coast up and down and back to Iowa, pulling the Scamp with his Subaru, which was really appealing to me.
That opened up an entire new category of things we could live in that maybe wouldn't require us buying an expensive truck.
We started looking into fiberglass trailers, And at this point, we thought that a bathroom was a definite necessity. So we were looking at the 16-foot models of the Scamp primarily.
And as we were thinking about it, it was like, well, if we didn't have a bathroom, we could go down to the next size in Scamps to a 13-foot. Do we really need a bathroom? And after a bunch of thought, we kind of realized we didn't want to be pooping in our tiny space. We didn't want to have to carry around all this black water, drain it, clean it. That would take up a lot of space and also just be a huge pain in the butt. And people shouldn't be in a bathroom more than 30 minutes a day. So why would we dedicate 20% of our living quarters to a place where we spend such little amounts of time? There's toilets everywhere. Everywhere. In every public establishment, there's a toilet, and several in everybody's homes.
If we ever needed a toilet, or even now, if we decide that we want one for whatever reason, we could do a composting toilet and just put it under where we have our shoes.
So then we started broadening our search online to 13-foot fiberglass trailers. We tried to snag like 5 of them.
If they're under $10,000, they're gone or like claimed in 2 days.
They hold their value well. We really had no idea that there's such a market for fiberglass trailers. They're awesome.
Yeah, they're really cool.
We saw a guy in Minnesota selling his for $4,500 with some water damage. 1988, so a little bit older. We borrowed our friend Jordan Mackey's truck and drove it all the way up an hour south of Canada.
When we toured the Scamp, it had more water damage than we had previously thought, so we talked the guy down to $3,700 and gave him the cash and hooked up the Scamp.
And drove it back.
Yeah.
20 hours total, and then finally decided to stop in a Des Moines, Iowa Walmart parking lot and stayed the night. I cried. Reality was finally kicking in, like, oh my god, we're doing it. We did it. We just did it. So we're doing it.
I felt pretty good, because every time I looked in the rearview mirror and saw our house that was completely paid off behind us, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Elsa, not so much.
We were planning on using my Pontiac Vibe. It's rated to tow about 2,000 pounds.
I was on the phone with my dad, talking to him about whether we could do it with the Vibe or whatever, and he was like, couldn't you just do it with the Mini? I guess, maybe. And we looked into it.
Put a tow hitch on the back, took it on a test drive, and the Mini Cooper became our tow vehicle for an entire year. A month before we moved into the Scamp full time, I went with a friend to Vietnam, and you stayed back and you worked on...
I worked on like all the water damage and just really made the Scamp livable.
And the day I got back to the US, we moved out of our house and into the Scamp. And it was a pretty big thing. At first it was very challenging. Like, it is a smaller space.
Another difficult thing was getting around societal validation to like keep doing our thing. It seemed like everybody that we talked to was skeptical and would just tell us that like that's not gonna work. So to keep our head on straight and just keep pushing with our vision was pretty difficult, especially initially.
Right now we're kind of like, what should we do? We have our whole house basically on our backs. We can go anywhere. But now, after a year of practice, we are living full-time in nature. We have more time, we're creating more.
We're making so many new friends and connecting with people that we wouldn't otherwise have been able to. And we have a cool place for our friends from Kansas City to come out and hang out too, which is pretty awesome.
We are absolutely so much happier living this way than I could have ever imagined. I would have never guessed that this was going to be so incredibly perfect.
And honestly, solutions have come more easily than we previously thought. Like as you do it, or as we do it, we figure out solutions to things more quickly than I could have imagined, truly. So now we're here on a mountain with our new Subaru and a year of Scamp life under our belt.
And so our journey begins. Again. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next video. Bye.